Welcome back to this conversation around navigating a graceful transition. This is the third video in our 4-part series. You know, we should tell people, if you haven't seen the other 2 videos yet, the first one on how to start when change comes calling, and then the second one on OPOs, which is a Maria Sirois coined term, other people's opinions about your transition. Make sure you click the link and check those out. Today, we're going to be talking about a concept that comes to us from the field of positive psychology around being self-full. Can you explain what that means, Maria?
Sure. Well, let's back up for a second. You know, in my work in the field of resilience, and Karlee's work in the field of coaching, and this sort of intersection we have about life transitions, we are both aware that one of the critical barriers to navigating a graceful transition is where we get stuck around being selfish, like focusing on myself, focusing on everything I need to do to move forward, including the mindful pause that we talked about in the first video, and knowing how to move toward a more authentic expression of oneself that we talked about in the second video. This question seems to be foundational underneath all of our barriers is it, aren't I being selfish?
Right.
Or somehow
Right.
self-centered?
Mm-hmm.
So we began to explore this question of if we're not selfish, and we don't want to be selfless, right? We don't want to give ourselves completely away. Where's that beautiful middle ground, that integration place where we are attending to ourselves and keeping in mind, of course, the needs and obligations and care that we have for others? Where's that beautiful place where both are held as meaningful and important? So with some work I've done in the past with Tal Ben-Shahar, we came up with this expression called self-fullness. And it's this beautiful opening up and diving more deeply into the elements of what traditionally had been called self-care.
Right.
So when you think of self-care, what first comes to mind?
Oh, taking a bubble bath.
Right.
Being in a bathtub, yeah.
Right. And that's where most of us go. We go to practical things like exercise, sleep, and healthy nutrition. And then usually most of us can come up with 1 or 2 other practices or treats, really, that we give ourselves that help us feel like we're taking care of ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And that conversation has remained the same since the 1980s. And yet, if you dive more deeply into people's experiences of what both catalyzes growth or halts it, there seems to be a choice point around, I exercise, I eat well, I try to get enough rest, I take a periodic bubble bath, or for me, I light a candle and read a poem, and yet I'm still tortured, and yet I still haven't moved forward toward my dream, or, every time life intervenes, I get so thrown off that all of those practices just disappear.
Right.
So in this exploration of self-fullness, we dive pretty deeply into the elements that actually elevate that sense of being steady in oneself, setting healthy boundaries, and investing in what we call positive self-regard. So we're not going to tell you the model now, because we want you to experience it with us at Grapalo in June.
Part of what I love about this, though, about this concept of being self-full, Maria, too, and what you said this really interesting phrase that pops up a lot when I'm coaching around I treat myself to something nice. I treat myself to a massage, or I treat myself to a day off, or whatever. And what I would love to see kind of a mindset shift around that is that it's not a treat. Right? That in the process of growth and transformation and transition, that we realize that this is actually, it's not optional, that it's vital, and that it's essential, and that this is something that bolsters that positive self-regard in the direction we want to go.
Exactly.
Understanding the correlation between the level at which the cup is full, your personal well-being is full, and then your ability to navigate change are so interlinked. So I love that. I love that you speak to that. That concept. And we hear a lot too around coaching this idea of, because who am I? Right? Like, who am I to want something different? Who am I to think about leaving this person? Who am I to think about marrying this person? Who am I to want a different career? This kind of imposter syndrome comes up. And I find that when we lean into this model of being self-full, we ask better questions. Not the who am I, but the, well, what would I really enjoy next? You know, or what would bring me a more fulfilling experience in the face of this change?
And because we know that questions are doorways, that who am I question beautifully, when looked at from the place of what is the longing underneath that, and the longing underneath that is actually to give ourselves permission to invest in ourselves. That's what's driving that question of, well, I don't really deserve this, or who am I to ask for more? Underneath that is that longing to be given that permission. Once we are able to do that, it opens up a deeper door, a bigger doorway into how can I sustain and nourish myself while sustaining and nourishing those connections that are important to me. And that question is gold. And that's the question that removes that whole barrier around selfish, selfless, confusion about investing in ourselves as we navigate these transitions.
So I would love, I'm curious to hear in the comment section around this video, what might it look like if you lean towards being self-full? What might you bring in? What might you welcome into your space, into your days, if you gave yourself permission to be nourished deeply during this transition?
Now we know we haven't actually articulated the entire model, so what we're doing is playing with a phrase right now. But what if? What if you did allow yourself to move out of selflessness or selfishness toward this place where you are actually investing in your own fullness? What would that look like?
Oh, I can't wait to hear. I want to know. We're curious. So stay tuned for the 4th video. It's coming soon.